in the other room, you have the posts 1/3, 1/3, but these posts here are not 1/3, 1/3, because you have to have a post here to support the gallery, which has been built across here. And so this post is in a different position from the one on the other side. And so it holds both this gallery and that gallery, and then the other post, and these are the original posts. So let me point out what was original to this side of the building. When this side of the building was built, it was started in the spring of 1784 and finished in 1785. And like I said, they moved the meeting house around. And out there were carriage houses, and there were carriage houses out there as well. And they built this as their facing benches, and the facing benches were built for people who were normally considered to be speakers. So if you're standing up here and you're speaking, you're up higher so people can hear you. So this was for people who were thought of as being speakers. And the paneling here is much different on this side than it was on the other side. The other side is the original paneling that was finished in 1715. And this is the original paneling that was finished in 1785. But this paneling is more ornate. And being more ornate, there were some Quakers who were very strong in Quaker simplicity who didn't think that it was appropriate for it to be ornate. And so I'll go over the building piece by piece. First of all, on the ceiling up there, there's a series of hooks that go across, and they were hooks for lamps. That is what is called a town lamp. That's an original, except that's been wired for electricity. And these all hung, there were 5 of them across there, and they all hung the way this is hung. And they were lighted by kerosene. Over here, we have a kerosene container. And this is what was used to fill those lamps that hung from the ceiling. And it's kind of far away, and I'll maybe walk over there later. But over on that door over there, that's under the steps, is a container, and that was for matches. And underneath, it's rough. So they would strike the matches by rubbing them underneath, and then they would light the lamps. So that if it was dark or in the evening, that's how they lighted the meeting house. On the wall over there is a lamp, and that is the original spot where the lamp went. Because when I got that lamp and decided to put it back up, I found out that the exact screw holes were still there. And so I put it back, although that's wired for electricity, but I put it back exactly where that lamp was when this part of the building was finished. So, the benches. The benches are an interesting story because in some ways they're all alike and in some ways they're all different. And the way they did it was, almost everybody who was a member of this meeting at the time was a farmer, and they knew how to do carpentry, and they knew how to do things, and of course they built the meeting house. And so each family was asked to build a bench. And so each of these benches are built in the same way, but each one, as you can tell, is individually different. I made one of these benches myself that was outside, replacing the one outside that was being eaten by carpenter bees, and I found it to be a very interesting process. You have to have a piece of wood that's 14 inches, and you can only get that at the sawmill. You can't get it at a lumber yard. And so I have built one of these, but not nearly so well as the ones that you see here, that many of which are reinforced by iron. We were living in South Jersey in an iron district, and the iron industry in this was very strong, and so is the brick industry in this. So the bricks that went to build this building are also part of the bricks that went to build across the street at Charlie Brown's now, at a restaurant across the street. And so this became the addition that was finished in 1785. So this part is not 300 years old, but the other part is 300 years old. Now, originally, they had very meager paneling between these two sides. But what happened was, in 1826, there was a split within the Society of Friends between the Hicksites and the Orthodox. And this was one of two meetings in the United States where they didn't separate. In other words, they continued to maintain the same property, but in Haddonfield and in Salem and in Woodstown and other places, they actually, one side or the other left. It was usually the Orthodox that left, and they built their own meeting house. But that didn't happen here. So what happened here was, instead, they built this wall. This wall is a substantial wall and can be raised and lowered by pulling the ropes that are attached to pulleys. And that side of the meeting house was the Orthodox side, and this side of the meeting house was the Hicksite side. And they also separated the graveyard and the gravestones out there that face north and south. They are the Orthodox, and the ones that face east and west, they are the Hicksite. And they met in relatively peace and harmony for about 100 years. Somewhere around 1926, they decided to meet together. 1926, they decided to meet together, and they shared the meeting house when they needed. If there was a wedding or something, they would agree to let the other side use the side that was normally assigned to them. And then somewhere in the 1950s, they did away with the separation altogether, and today there are no longer any Orthodox, there are no longer any Hicksites. And so this is the front of the meeting house today. And as I said, on this door, there is a small container. Underneath is rough. It took me quite a while to figure out what that was for, but that's where the matches were, and you would strike the matches along the bottom, and that's how you would light the various lights that needed to be lit. In 1926, or thereabouts, they brought in electricity. And so from that point on, in my own personal life, we've always had electricity here. And when I was young, they had two stoves here. The two stoves that they had here, one was coal and one was wood, and they resided right here, and their pipes went across on this ceiling and then up through those openings there. And then from there, they were attached to the chimney, and then they went on up and outside. And so that's how the meeting house was heated. And in the wintertime, if you were cold, you moved closer to the stoves, and if you were too warm, you moved farther away. The door has the original lock. This is a huge lock, as you can see, but it was original. And it was a lock that was used to lock the meeting house. And of course, it's long outdated. We have a modern lock today. And the door can be locked on this side by these rods that go up and down that keep this side in place. And then, like I said, we now rely on modern locks to lock the meeting house. And this, as far as I know, is the original wiring and the original locks, lights, switches. So we'll now go upstairs. Okay. Well, that about does it for this room. Like I said, this was the Hicksite side. And about 1920s, 1930s, they began to meet together. They would old